standard test your audio before you start thing.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Did you tune into that? Did you tune into the Steve McRae's live chat just now?
No, I don't typically watch Steve McRae's
Oh,
very
okay.
often.
Are you more of a fan of Kyle then, I guess?
No,
Oh, okay.
I don't watch either of them.
Gotcha. So are you an atheist then?
Yes, I am.
All right. And what do you mean by that term?
I mean, there's no good reason to believe in a God.
Okay. That's actually what I'm debating with Tom Jump about tomorrow. So do you mind if I ask you a couple questions about that?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm debating with him tomorrow on Modern Day Debates channel about the term atheist and why I believe that it doesn't make sense to say that it is the not believing there's enough evidence for God or something like that. Well, put it how you put it again. Not that there's not enough evidence for God or something like that.
There's insufficient evidence for me to believe in a God.
Okay. So what I would say is the first reason why I think that that's not a good reason to call yourself an atheist is because, first of all, there are Christians called Theists, which believe that there isn't any good evidence to believe in God, but that we should believe in God anyway, and that would make them atheists. To give that definition. So they're Christian atheists.
No, they're not atheists. They're not atheists. They believe in God, right?
Yeah, but according to that definition, that an atheist, and this is what Tom says, he starts all of his talks with, I am an atheist, and by that I mean there's no evidence for God. And I'm saying that Christian fideists also say there's no evidence for God, but that we should believe in him anyway. So according to that definition, they would be atheist as well. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, that's wrong. You're incorrect. It doesn't follow.
Okay. So let's take the proposition that P.
They believe in God. They believe in God, don't they?
Yeah, but let's take the proposition. So the proposition is that atheism is that there isn't any good evidence for God. Now, that since there isn't any good evidence for God isn't saying there's not a God. It's just saying there isn't any good evidence that God exists.
No.
They would admit that.
So I'm not saying atheism is there isn't enough evidence for God. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't believe in God.
Okay, well that's different.
No, that's the same thing. It's the same thing. I don't believe in God because there isn't insufficient evidence for God. So I do not possess the belief in God. So the way I structure things is we have feelings and we have beliefs. A belief can be true or false. Well, actually, all beliefs are a proposition in your head that can be either true or false.
I agree with that. Right. I think that you're correct about that. A lot of atheists get that wrong, though.
So when I say I know something, that's simply a justified belief, a justified and true belief.
Right.
So there is no justification for me to assent that to believe that the proposition God exists is true, because it doesn't have sufficient evidence or warrant for belief.
Okay, so my initial question was, are you an atheist? And you said yes. And so then when I asked to clarify that was, why are you an atheist? And you said, I'm an atheist because there is no evidence for a God.
Correct.
And I said that Fideists believe the same thing, that there's no evidence for God, but yet they still believe it. But you take the extra step and say, due to that, I believe there are no gods, right?
Well, Fideists believe in God,
Right.
and they believe in God for an irrational reason. They're not rational.
Right. They don't believe that they should have to justify it.
Right. That's
Yeah.
not rational.
Yeah. But I'm saying you take the extra step and say, due to me not having enough evidence, there is no God, right?
I would say that I am an atheist because the proposition P, God exists. The argument is either not valid or not sound or not cogent. So there's no evidence. So the reason I don't believe in Martians is because there's no evidence for Martians.
Yeah,
'Cause,
but you wouldn't take the extra step and say, therefore there are no Martians.
yeah, I'm not saying a categorical that Martians couldn't exist.
Okay.
I'm not saying a categorically a God could not exist. However, I can say that Elvis Presley, who is the risen God himself, from which you cannot do logic and you cannot do science because without Elvis Presley. But I can say that that God does not exist
Okay.
because that God is in the grave.
Okay.
So I can say that specific gods don't exist, but as a general proposition, I can't say that there cannot be any such thing as a God. There could such things could exist, possibly.
So here's what my question is. Are you one of these atheists that say that you just lack a belief, that you don't make any positive claims?
I would say I lack a belief because I reject the proposition that God exists is true, and I reject it on grounds that there is no evidence that God is there is no evidence for the God.
Okay. But a lack of belief doesn't actually make a claim. So like if I had if we were taking this like a scientific hypothesis, and I were to say, okay, what explains what explains uh, this proposition P, and I were to say, well, my hypothesis is God. The hypothesis that I lack that belief in God isn't actually a hypothesis. It's just saying, well, I don't find any reason to buy your hypothesis, but that's not actually given a competing hypothesis nor a defeater for the first hypothesis. Do you get that?
Well, sure, no, that's true. My lack of belief is simply a description of my attitude towards the proposition.
Okay, well let me read this for
So,
you real quick. I have
so if you were to ask, does God exist? Well, I would ask for the definition or the argument, and
yeah,
then
so
I would say, based on that definition or argument, I would say, I reject the proposition that God exists. And then I would say, what is my attitude? Well, I lack the belief in God on account that I have rejected the proposition that God exists.
okay. Well, let me do this because this is what kind of spawned it all for me was um Paul Draper, you may know, is an atheist philosopher. Are you familiar with Paul Draper at all?
I'm not familiar with him. I've heard the name before.
Okay. Well, he's a prominent atheist scholar, but he wrote the definition for atheism in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And under that title, definition of atheism, he writes, atheism is typically defined in terms of theism. Theism, in turn, is best understood as a proposition, something that is either true or false, which you admitted to that. It is often defined as the belief that God exists, but here belief means something believed. It refers to propositional content of belief, not to an attitude or psychological state of believing. This is what makes sense to say that theism is true or false and to argue for or against it. If, however, atheism is defined in terms of theism, then and theism is the proposition that God exists and not the psychological condition of believing that there is a God, then it follows that atheism is not the absence of a psychological condition of believing that God exists. The A in atheism must be understood as negation instead of absence, as not instead of without. Therefore, in philosophy at least, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, the proposition that there are no gods. So,
Yeah.
do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that. I would say that I have both.
Okay.
I have I reject the proposition that God exists, and as a consequence, I find that since I have rejected the concept of God, when I look inside of myself, I can find no positive belief in a God. So
Okay. So I
I would
guess
say that I lack that belief.
yeah. So I guess the only thing that I would ask then is what he said right there at the end, that atheism isn't the psychological state of not of lacking a belief, but rather it is the positive belief that there are no gods. So what I would say is i- the the older debates from from the 17 1800s 19 early 1900s were a lot of debates that the atheists an extra took on the burden of proof as well to prove that atheism existed. But I feel like because atheism, there, as Pine Creek even admitted the other night, there's no evidence for atheism. I feel like because of that, people have moved to the lack of belief to not have to hold up a burden in a debate. Because if the debate is, does God exist or not, or is theism true or atheism true or something like that, then both sides would not only have to defeat each other's arguments, but they would have to present positive arguments for their position. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with Doug that there are no good arguments for atheism.
Okay. So I guess in that sense, I'm an atheist. And by that I mean there's no evidence or good arguments for atheism.
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
Then you're not an atheist.
Now I said I'm an atheist. So what I'm doing is I'm
Yeah,
just turning
that's a theist.
right. I'm just turning but I'm using it in that way because if atheism means that there is no evidence for God, therefore I'm an atheist, then I'm turning it around and saying, okay, well I'm an atheist because is no evidence for atheism. You get what I'm doing?
I'm not saying that there's no evidence for atheism. I'm saying I'm obviously there's plenty of evidence for atheism.
Oh, you
Lots of
think
people,
so?
yeah, lots of people do not believe in God.
Yeah,
Therefore,
but
that's what atheism is people who don't believe in God. Those people exist, and so
yeah,
there's plenty of evidence for atheism.
but if you follow that same train of logic that, well, there's plenty of evidence for atheism because there's a lot of people who believe in atheism. Well, you could say there's more evidence for God because there's more people that believe in God. So
No, that's a appeal to popularity. That's fallacious.
no, but I'm just using your exact argument in return
No, I wasn't arguing.
because you said there's plenty
No,
of evidence for atheism because
yeah,
there are atheists.
yeah. Atheism is simply people who reject the belief in God.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm saying
Right.
that's not evidence for atheism, though. And
Yeah, it
evidence,
is.
so you think that because there's people who reject God, that's evidence for atheism.
That's evidence for the phenomenon of atheism.
Okay? But
The evidence for the phenomenon of Islam is that there are millions of people who believe in Allah and Muhammad. That's not, that shouldn't be taken as evidence that Muhammad and Allah actually exist.
Okay, so
It's evidence for Islam as a social movement. I'm talking about atheism as a population, as a group of people, as a movement.
not for the core tenets of atheism. You mean just as a social?
The core tenets of atheism is simply that there is no good evidence for God.
Okay, but that's the question. Is you're saying that because there are atheists out there, that is evidence that atheist as a movement exists. But I'm saying, but what's
Oh
the
yeah,
evidence?
but that doesn't imply that there is no good evidence for God. So that would be independent of the criticism of theism, right? So the fact that atheists exist doesn't mean that theism is false. Theism is false because it cannot make its central claim true. It cannot provide evidence or a logical reasoning to demonstrate its core tenet, right?
Mhm. Well, I guess because we're just kind of we're just gonna kind of jump around because we don't really have a set topic. I guess what I would ask it, or let's because we're defining atheism, let's define evidence, because I'm gonna give you my definition of evidence and see if you agree with me on it. Okay. So say that we're in a court of law and we're trying to figure out what is permissible as evidence. And if you're a judge, would you agree with me that evidence is anything that would make the proposition more likely given that than not having that?
Could you run that by me again?
Sure. Let me give you an example to make it easier. So evidence is anything that contributes to it being more likely given that than not given that. So if we're in a court of law and we find a long black hair near the murder weapon, whether that has anything to do with it or not, that contributes as evidence, whether it's good evidence or bad evidence. It could just be that that strand of hair had fell off of somebody else onto somebody's jacket that was affiliated with them, and it made its way to the crime scene. But given that, it would count as evidence because it makes it adds to the more, it makes something more likely given it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I suppose. I take evidence is empirical facts that tend to support or counter a theory or a
Okay,
hypothesis.
so you're an empiricist.
Well, yeah, of course.
Well, I don't know what you mean by of course, because most people have rejected that view. Most philosophers.
Really?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
and here's the reason why. There are all kind of things that can't be shown empirically. Like, for example, the scientific method can't even establish the scientific method as being true. You can't scientifically prove that science is the best method because you would have to assume it to use it. To give you another example, mathematics. You can't empirically prove that numbers are real, but we take them as real.
I don't think numbers are real.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Okay.
They're just thoughts, they're ideas, they're concepts in your head. They're not real.
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with that or not, because I think what you're saying there is that because they're abstract objects, that they're not actual objects.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I would probably disagree with that though. But
Okay. What do you think they are?
I would say they're abstract objects. That doesn't mean they're not real.
Well, I think it depends on your meaning. I think that they are simply ideas that we have in our heads.
Okay.
And your previous comment about science not being able to prove science is gibberish. Nobody thinks science has to prove science.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you're saying empirical. I would imagine that you mean by empirical, testable in a scientific fashion.
Yeah.
Something that can be proven by using your senses. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. But we know above all things that our senses are unreliable. So
Sure.
that's why most people now have rejected empiricism, or what used to be called verificationism, for a more open view, because it seems to be too limited.
Empiricism isn't verificationism. The
Well,
verification principle came from Carnap and the logical positivists of the 1950s or so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with positivism.
It's not empiricism.
Yeah, but it's saying that verificationist is that we can verify by empirical means.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying that. I don't mean to say they're the exact same. They have the exact same meaning.
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
mean by that is that they say we should verify it by empirical means only. So I didn't mean to conflate the two terms. I don't think that that's a view that people hold. A lot of people hold anyway, and I'm not trying to appeal to population, but I'm just saying that people have moved away from it because of how limited it is in scope.
No. I understand the criticism of logical positivism, but I don't see how that's related to my empiricism. And today, people look for falsification and the principle of falsification.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So if evidence is only empirical, right? You said that evidence has to be empirical. That's what I'm critiquing. And if that's true, then like we're lost because of quantum mechanics. Like not only is there
Quantum mechanics is empirical. What are you talking about?
right, but let me finish. Not only is it is empirical, but it's empirical in that we have to observe it indirectly, first of all. So you can't observe quantum mechanics. You have to take the data as it comes in and then perceive it. So we have to.
Okay.
So number one, we have to perceive it, right? But and we can be flawed by our perceptions. But number two, we can't. We know from the slit test and other tests that when we perceive things without, let's say, a camera or like a computer generating what actually happened, the outcome changes, right?
I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Yeah. So we have to.
I don't see a problem with accepting indirect evidence.
Indirect observation.
Yeah.
So because
I don't see a problem with that.
If we observe something and then it changes when we're not observing it, and then we look at the indirect data that comes out of that, it has to be translated in a way that we can understand it, and therefore not only do we not know what changes could have been made in the between before it got to us in the translation to us, but also there are over 10 interpretations of quantum mechanics. So, So you look at quantum mechanics and you go, well, this is true. And then you go, well, which interpretation of it though? The one that's completely deterministic or the one that's not? Or, and so all I'm saying is.
Well, those are interpretations. Those are interpretations. The actual math, the actual physics checks out. As Richard Feynman said, just shut up and calculate. The math checks out. The science is extremely valid. Quantum mechanics is one of the most highly validated scientific theories in the history of science, and it's highly empirical because it's based entirely on empirical evidence, right?
All right. Well, let me ask you this.
You accept
I
indirect
do.
evidence too, right?
Well, I do accept it as evidence, but see, my thing is that's not the only thing I would accept as evidence. I'll accept things that aren't empirical as evidence.
Well, I can't imagine. I have no understanding what a non-empirical evidence could be.
Okay. So when we talk about supernatural, right? It seems that you've stacked the deck in your favor, and here's why I say that. Um, Science only studies the natural world or the natural realm. That's all it can study. It tells us what nature is like, but it can't tell us if there's anything beyond nature, and if there is, what is it like? Because only it's only studies the natural realm. So if there were something, um, it may not be empirical in that sense. Do you get what I mean?
No, I don't understand. Because science can test um, supernatural theories or hypotheses. So they have done scientific tests. There have been studies on the efficacy of prayer.
I know that.
Right.
That's not.
So that's science testing the supernatural.
Yeah, that's not the supernatural. That's human
Prayer isn't
prayer.
supernatural?
No, that's human prayer. Now, maybe the effect of a prayer could be
No.
supernatural.
That's the hypothesis, right? The
But
hypothesis is that if I pray to my God, um, X will happen.
right, but what I'm saying is science as it is, and almost every atheist agrees with me on this. Science as it is tells us how it refers to what it studies what is in nature and what is the natural world.
Well,
So I don't think like if there was something that was immaterial, how could it study that? You get what I'm
yeah,
saying?
exactly. How could we study something that doesn't exist?
Well, because it's immaterial doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Well, that's what the word means.
No, no, no. Because there could be an entirely different species of being outside of nature, what we call our nature. Okay?
What does
And
that mean?
what does that mean?
Yeah, I cannot understand what it would mean for something to be immaterial because you've simply defined it in terms of what it is not in terms of what it is.
Okay.
So the word im means not, right? Something is immaterial. It means it's not material. Well, then what is it?
Okay. Well, let me read you the definition of science then. The intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. So it only has to do with physical and natural things. Now, there's a claim, okay? Now you don't believe it's true that there are things that are not um, aren't part of nature, that are beyond nature,
What does that
transcend.
mean? What is that?
Yep.
So you're just talking in generalities and negatives. You can't investigate what something isn't. You have to investigate what it is. And
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the
but
word immaterial does is say what this thing isn't,
okay.
not what it is.
So there is something here. I'm just giving you the claim real quick. There's something that that transcends nature, and it came let's say before nature. Okay, but I know with the tense of time, I'm saying prior to nature. Thus, it's outside of nature, beyond nature, and um, here's the thing: is if this thing does exist, okay, then that means that it existed prior to nature and that nature is an emergent property of this thing. Now you can say, yeah, but what is the thing? Right? But
Yeah.
but here's the thing is we live in the natural world. So we have to promorphize everything that's not natural. That does not mean that there isn't anything that is not natural or beyond nature.
Well, let me put it this way. Suppose that I die tomorrow and I wake up and I'm in a supernatural world. I am a soul and I am there with other souls. There is, not to assume Christianity, but there is, let's say, some kind of God, or possibly not, or a demon, or possibly none. It's just other souls. So the first question I'm going to have is, what am I breathing? What am I standing on? Do I have hands? What are my hands? What are they made of? Do I have a body? What is my body made of? How does my body interact with the other bodies that are here? How does my body, does my body, my soul, need to breathe? Or am I breathing? Maybe I don't need to breathe. What am I standing on? And if such a world exists, there will be answers to these questions. And then all I will have done is have extended natural physical science to this other realm. I will say, well, there is another substance which has a composition which interacts in certain ways. My soul is composed of this substance, right? And this substance interacts physically with other substances. This is naturalism. I will be a naturalist.
Okay. I don't disagree with you that there would be another substance. Okay. I do believe that. But what I'm getting at is what I would answer all your questions with is so you said something like, well, what are my hands made of? And what are the
Yeah,
other people made of? Let me ask you this. In a dream, what are people made of? What are your hands made of?
there's no hands and there's no people there.
Okay. So it's just an illusion.
They're just thoughts in my head. Yeah,
Okay. Well, what are thoughts made of? Nothing, right?
the thoughts are brain states.
Okay. But is that all they are?
Yeah,
So all thought is a brain state.
yeah.
Okay. So when you're dreaming and you dream that you go through all of these things, you're saying that you intend in your dream, these are just brain states that you're having, even though you're having interactions with other people and things like this, right?
No, I'm not having interactions with other people. There's nobody else in my head. It's just me.
Okay. So do you think that you have intentionality?
I have intentions, sure.
Okay. Why would you have intentions if it's just brain states? Like Dr. I think it's Wheelingberg, or no, Alex Rosenberg. That's the atheist professor that debated William and Craig, who says there's no. I think he wrote the Atheist Guide to the Galaxy or something like that, and he said there's no reason for an atheist to believe in intentionality.
Well, I probably define it differently than he does. I think that brain states can refer to other states of affairs or conditions outside of the body or things like that. So I think that brain states can refer to other things. The
Okay.
same, yeah.
What about his claim that people do not endure from moment to moment?
I'm not sure I know what he means by that.
Okay, we'll skip that.
Yeah,
So let's get back to the evidence.
he sounds like a mereological nihilist, which would be
Well,
considered, but
he's not. No, I don't think he's a nihilist. If you look up Alex Rosenberg's debate with William Lane Craig and watch it, and there was a panel of judges, and that kind of judged the whole thing, and I think you get a good idea of what some philosophically minded atheists believe and the reasons why they believe it. But just to gloss over that and get back to what evidence consists of, I would say, okay, I would say that anything counts as evidence if it makes the proposition more probable given that thing. Would you disagree with that?
Well, it has to make the hypothesis or scientific theory more likely. It would have
That's what I'm
to,
saying.
yeah.
Any evidence is that which, given it, makes the proposition more likely.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a proposition that even a lot of atheists agree is evidence for God, and you can tell me if you think that it's not. Okay, so keep in mind, it's something that makes the proposition more likely given that thing than not would be considered evidence. So take for example, fine tuning. Okay, now you may have a multiverse or another explanation, but if the hypothesis is God, we would expect a finely tuned universe. Since we do find ourselves in a finely tuned universe, it would make sense that that proposition, God, is made more probable by the given that the universe is tuned for life than if not. Therefore, it would be you. And like another atheist said, it may not be good evidence, but it is evidence nonetheless.
So I think that the fine tuning, for one, begs the question, and the other thing I'd have to say is that why does God need to fine tune the universe? He's omnipotent. He could make life in any universe.
Well, it's not that he needs to. It's just that if we were to you have to sometimes that you get your answer by looking at the opposite. So let's say that we did just evolve in a universe that's kind of random and things come together, in a certain way that produce life, and it evolved into conscious life, and we're able to look around and reflect on all this, even though that's a miracle. Let's look around let's take that for example, and then let's say, why do things operate by mathematical laws? Like, why can you describe laws in a mathematical way? And why don't they change tomorrow? So why doesn't something like a glass of tea just pop into existence randomly? Now you could say, well, because that's not the way our universe is. But honestly, if there's no God, no designer, no agent that created this place, why wouldn't things like that occur?
Well,
Right?
maybe it could occur. It's just really, 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 really unlikely.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying is that since we haven't observed anything of that sort, it would count. Maybe you might say not good evidence, maybe you'd say super weak evidence, but it counts for the fact that we are in a orderly universe.
Oh, I think we. It seems to me, from the best that I know, that yes, we have an orderly universe in which it behaves in certain ways according to certain laws of physics. Yes.
Okay, now let's take that and let's say, given no agent, no designer, no grand scheme, it would make sense that not everything would follow by mathematical laws, but instead something should probably happen that isn't normal. Induction shouldn't always hold, but given that it does,
Induction doesn't always hold.
when has it not held?
Well, it's not. Inductive inferences aren't in, in they aren't always true, right?
Like
They aren't
in what
necessarily
case?
true.
Yeah, yeah.
They
You
aren't
mean in the
necessarily true.
future? Yeah, yeah. You mean in the future they may not
I
be
mean,
true, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm talking about
So
of the evidence we have, it's always true. Now, it may not always be
I don't
true in
know
the
that.
future.
I don't know that that's so. I don't know that that's necessarily so.
But I'm saying of the evidence we have, we don't have any examples of where it deviated from norm, where gravity didn't accelerate at 9.8 meters per second squared. We
Oh,
don't
okay.
have, you see what I'm saying? We don't have a deviation from that. But so all the evidence we do have says that uniformity of nature is what is what occurs naturally, and
Yeah.
that may be weak evidence for God, but because that's what you would expect with a God, it would count in the sense that it makes it more probable that that is true given it than not.
I would expect uniformity of nature without a God,
Why is that?
because randomness it has a lower probability.
Why without a creator would randomness have a lower probability than non-randomness?
Well, random events have a probability of 0. So under
Why is that?
under the uniform, because that's how probability works.
Yeah, but you're looking at it from an agent's perspective. I'm saying before
No,
humans existed, before anything else existed, when everything came into existence, why would the fact that it
I don't know that everything came into existence.
okay, so you don't believe that the universe is 15 billion years old then?
Our cosmos,
Yes.
uh, our cosmos appears to be 15 billion years, but I don't know what was before it. It could have
Yeah,
come.
so
It
I'm
could have
not,
come
yeah,
from.
so I'm not saying that there was nothing before it.
Yeah, it could have been like we say a random quantum fluctuation, right? In the space time that existed before that, which doesn't even make sense because there wasn't a before.
Right.
But it could have just been a quantum fluctuation.
Yeah,
In such
that's what Lawrence
that
Krauss and others
yeah,
give, but
yeah.
but uh but Alex Lincoln said that any universe that is expanding must have had a finite beginning. Now you can say, but no, wait, there was fluctuation before that. But honestly, I don't think that means what a lot of people take it to mean. There's no space, no time, no material. Just
No, there. So Lawrence was usually criticized for calling sort of space-time itself without anything in it, nothing, because it's not a philosophical nothing.
no, not
I would
space time.
I would agree with those critics and
Yeah.
say it wasn't a nothing. But I can understand why he would call it nothing. But if we accept it as a something, then something can come from something.
Yeah, but again, you have to then ask, where did the quantum fluctuation come from?
It's just random. I mean, that's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Yeah, but didn't what got us here, isn't what got us here the fact that you said that randomness is more improbable? And then I
Uh,
said, what about at the beginning before? And I said, if I know I'm putting before in scare quotes, but before everything came into existence. And you said, well, I don't believe everything came into existence. But now that we
well,
finally get here, you say, well, yeah, it was random.
well, we switched topics. You were talking about uniformitarianism and the question about whether or not we can assume that the laws of physics will be uniform. And
But you
I
said
was
randomness is less
right.
probable.
Yeah. So the alternative to uniformitarianism would be simply randomness, and I can say that I can I can accept that, or I can presuppose uniformitarianism on the basis that a completely random universe is less likely. It has a lower probability of being true than the uniformitarian hypothesis.
Okay, I don't agree with you. I don't think
That's
that
how probability works.
that's what I'm saying. That's how probability works in
Yeah. Yeah,
given.
random events have a lower probability than ordered events.
So if I roll a dice, it's less probable that I'll get a random outcome than a ordered outcome.
Um, I'm not sure how that applies in this discussion.
Okay. Well, I mean, we can move past it. I'm just saying,
Because
all right,
die aren't really random. They're simply results that we can't know, right? They aren't hard random.
okay, so maybe we mean two things by random, because what I mean by random is that it wasn't, it had no telos, no purpose behind it. It was just something that occurred, like a roll of the dice. You roll the dice, it lands on 3. There's a certain probability that would land on 3, but because you rolled it and it rolled on all, um, it randomly came up on the number 3. Not that there was a purpose behind it where you threw it on the wall a certain way to try and get it to 3. Do you follow me there?
Yeah. You would have to show that there's such a thing as purpose.
Okay, I think I can do that. Why don't you use a radio to hammer nails?
Well, I could if it's strong. If the case is strong enough, I could.
Sure, but I said, why don't you?
Because I don't want to break my radio.
Because it's not the purpose of a radio. You
No,
see,
no, I could use it to hammer
yeah,
nails
I'm
if I
not saying you
wanted.
can't. You can use all kind of things to do things it's not designed to do, that it has not purposed for that. You
Well,
can
purpose.
repurpose things.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You said
But,
that I would have to first show that there is purpose to something.
yeah. Purpose. So purpose is simply relative to me. So it's not an intrinsic feature of radios that they lack the purpose of hammering nails. I could use one to hammer in nails.
I agree with you. But I'm saying the reason why you don't in everyday life is because it's lousy for that, because it wasn't made for that purpose.
Yeah, but a bad hammer is still a hammer.
No, I can agree with that. But I would just say the reason why you've never done it in your life and other people don't do that is because it wasn't made for that purpose. You see, when something has certain effects, like for example, a radio is soft, it's too soft to hammer nails. Not saying you
Well, it depends on the radio.
Yeah, I was about to say, not saying you couldn't use a radio to do it, because maybe there's some metal on one radio or another, whatever, however it's designed to look or whatever. But I'm saying the reason why you don't typically hammer nails with a radio is because you want to keep your radio and you want to efficiently hammer your nails. So you will find something that was designed for that purpose, like a hammer that has a flat, strong head on it. Correct?
Yeah, but the objects don't have a property of purpose. The purpose is simply relative to my desires or my wants.
I can agree with that to a certain extent, but I would say though that hammers do have a purpose.
Oh, sure.
I would say that a car has a purpose, and
Yeah, the purpose of a car is to run over people on the sidewalk. Of course, everybody knows that.
yeah, so that's one outcome of driving a car. But the purpose of a car is to drive it. Now you can say, yeah, but I could drive it to work, or I could drive it over somebody, or but neither of those are the purpose of a car. The purpose of a car is to drive.
It could be the purpose of a car is to eat it. I can chop it into tiny little pieces and swallow it one by one. That's the purpose of
I
a
don't
car.
think that could be the purpose of a car, though. I think that's a stretch.
It could be. This car is made out of sugar and candy.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about a candy car, but I think that's moving the
Okay.
goalpost.
No, I'm just pointing out that things do not have values. Purpose is a value. Objects don't have values. It's not a property of a hammer that I can value it
Okay.
for its utility in hammering in nails.
Do people have values?
Values are subjective. They are relative to subjects, not to objects.
Okay. Do people have value?
Yeah, to me and to other people.
Only subjective value, right?
Well, it's intersubjective in the case of many people. Yes, we have intersubjective value to each other.
Okay, but all that means basically is that we subjectively give each other value.
Yes, yes.
So we don't have intrinsic value or worth.
Um,
So,
no, not.
so if somebody wants to use somebody as a means to an end, you would say that was wrong because they should subjectively value that person instead of just using them for sex or whatever else they may use them for?
Well, I would say it's wrong because I don't think that that's a good thing to do. I don't value that kind of behavior.
Yeah, but that's just your personal ethic.
Yeah, it is.
But you're saying that they should feel the way you feel?
I think that they should do things in such a way that is in line with my desires, and I would try to convince them that they ought not to do such and such. They ought not to um, um, steal. Let's take theft is wrong because most people don't like to have things taken away from them without
Okay.
their consent. Without their consent.
Well, in communist countries, there is no property rights. Like they don't take property rights to be moral. They think that it's immoral in some communist places.
Well, the people still have personal property.
I'm saying they would disagree with you though, and you're saying that they should feel the way you feel about it. And I'm saying why?
Yeah, because basically because I don't like it.
Okay. So people should adapt to what you like.
Yeah. And so my task is to convince other people that respecting property rights, respecting personal rights, respecting freedom of speech, freedom of association.
So you're for freedom of speech?
Well, of course, freedom of association, freedom of religion. It is my task, since I value those things, to convince other people that they should follow me in valuing those things.
Okay. And so other people should value your opinion over their own.
Well, my task is to convince them to accept my understanding.
Yeah.
And
They're not going to
for the
just.
most part, right. And in the most part, people, at least in the United States, in the Western world, pretty much follow my beliefs, which is just generally, like I said, the very basic liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience.
Well, let me ask you this.
Representative government, things like that. Don't steal, don't kill people, don't hit them with hammers or with radios
or cars, right?
Or cars, right?
But let me ask you this. Okay, so first I disagree with you that people should, because when you use the word should, you're appealing to something that they ought to know, like something that
ought to do.
But first of all, if I don't agree with that, but Are you familiar with the ought implies can distinction?
No.
So if you ought to do something, it implies that you can do that thing. So, but with biochemistry, according to a non-theist worldview, with biochemistry, one person believes one thing and the other person believes something totally different, but they both believe it partially, at least because of their biochemistry, their environment, things like this. And for you to say that they ought to believe what you believe implies that they even could believe what you believe.
I'm not sure that ought implies can. I'm not seeing the inference.
Okay, if you go to court tomorrow, let's say that you lived in communist Russia, and they said you cannot practice religion.
It's not communist anymore.
No, but I'm talking about in communist Russia, in Stalin's era.
Okay.
In the USSR.
All
Let's
right.
say you lived in and they said you ought not believe in religion, but because of the way your biochemicals work in your mind, according to an atheistic worldview, you can't not believe in it, because the more somebody tells you not to, it like gives you a better reason. Like, they don't want me to believe this. It might actually be more true because they're trying to get me to not believe it. So therefore, they're saying you ought not believe it, but they're implying that you cannot believe it.
Yeah, I don't quite understand. They're just. I'm not sure I understand that.
All
It
right.
doesn't seem
So
to make
let's
a lot
say,
of sense. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
well, it's a non-philosophical distinction. So
I've
you
never
may,
heard of it before.
okay, so you may know about some court cases where people have appealed to their biochemistry. So somebody with really high testosterone levels that hit somebody appeals to their biochemistry and says, "Hey, listen, I've done a lot of study on biochemistry. My testosterone levels and other levels are super high, and although I do think it was wrong when I did, I didn't actually choose to do it because of determinism and because of the factors of my environment. I mean, my biochemistry, for one, my testosterone's high and things like that, but also the factors of my environment. My dad used to hit me with the red book every time I seen him. And this guy walked up to me with a red book raised at me. And so I punched him. But it's because of my environment, my biochemistry, and all of that, that if you say I ought not have done that and I'm going to jail for it, you're implying that I could have not done that. But I couldn't have because of my environment and all the forces that determinism and all these things.
Okay. So,
So to the judge, if he says, you're implying that I couldn't have done that, the judge goes, no, you could have not done that, and you're going to jail for it. But according to that guy, he's got a rational argument. No, because of the factors at work in determinism, I could not have helped but done that.
well, I don't think that you can actually show that, for one thing. For another thing, high testosterone does not necessarily lead to violence. That's just bad science.
I agree. I said that was one of the factors, along with the environmental effect of the red book being raised at him and the deterministic values that went into play there.
Yeah, but he hit the other guy, didn't he?
Right.
Therefore, he's guilty.
Okay.
It
But
doesn't matter whether or not. It
but you
doesn't
know that
matter
people have
whether.
got off with that defense. People have got off in court with that defense. There's a famous case called the Twinkie defense, where a guy said that he had consumed so much junk food in the previous days that it altered his biochemistry,
Yeah,
and he got
yeah.
off
That
pretty good.
wasn't that he wasn't let off because of the Twinkie defense. He was let off because the United States is racist and homophobic.
You really believe that?
He was let out. He was accused of he killed milk in San Francisco, and he made an appeal to the Twinkie defense, right? And because of homophobia in America, they let him off. It wasn't because of the Twinkies. It was because the judge and the jury and everybody else were homophobic.
You really think that?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can buy that. Now, so since you're bringing up kind of like the left, let me ask you this, because you said people should believe what you believe, and I know a lot of leftists that say freedom of speech is homophobic and racist, but yet
I've never heard anybody say that, and
you haven't.
I would not agree with anybody that said that.
Oh, you wouldn't, but you
Yeah.
think that they should share your view, right?
I think that the should is simply entails an obligation on me to convince other people that um, to adopt my point of view.
Okay.
That's all I think of it as. And so I have never heard. I'm very liberal. I'm very much on the left end of the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never heard anybody say that.
Okay.
It sounds like something that's repeated on like Fox News is just fake news.
No. It's just
Well, it
people.
sounds like it sounds like fake news to me.
It may, because it contradicts your beliefs. A lot of
Well,
times when something that contradicts our beliefs, we hear it, we cling tighter to our beliefs and kind of try to
yeah,
take.
but it contradicts my experience.
Right,
I've
exactly.
never heard anybody say that. I've
Uh-huh.
never heard anybody express ideas like that. All the people I know believe in free speech, and they're
Sure.
very liberal, very much on the left.
But what
And
about all the rallies where they say F free speech and all that?
well, I've never been to such a rally, and I'm not
Hey,
aware of any
like
such
Antifa.
rally.
Antifa. They often say things like giving free speech to people that are on the right is you're validating Nazis.
I don't think that's what they say.
No, I mean I've seen them say that, and they
Yeah,
hold up signs that say "F free speech" and things like that.
yeah. I don't know the full context.
Okay,
I'm very much in favor of Antifa. I
you
think
are.
that, yeah, I'm very much, yes, because I think it's important to be against fascists.
So Ben Shapiro, you should have smashed all the windows at Berkeley and burn a car when Ben Shapiro comes to make a speech.
No, I don't believe that.
Oh, because that's what they did.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything.
Oh, okay. So you said that you
So,
supported them
yeah, I do.
and that they're just against fascists, and I said, well, what about Ben Shapiro?
What about him?
They said that he was a white supremacist, and
He
they
is.
burned. He's a Jew.
Yeah, he is. That's
The
not
the
inconsistent.
the Defamation League uh, pinned him as the number one target of of anti uh, of anti-Semitic um, hate speech from white nationalists.
Yeah,
And and
I'm not surprised.
and yet he's
White
a white
nationalists, yeah, white nationalists are on the right. Antifa is
I
on the
know
left.
that. I know that.
So I
I'm
don't see how
saying
that helps. I don't see how that helps your case here.
I'm saying that Ben Shapiro, who received the most hate from white nationalist groups, is being
Yeah.
called a white nationalist. It doesn't
No,
make sense.
I think he is. Um,
That was according to the Anti-Defamation League.
yeah, that's fine.
So what I'm saying is people have differing views than each other. And a
Yeah.
lot of times when people are confronted with views that contradict their beliefs, they cling tighter to their beliefs and try to brush off the other views. And what I'm saying is, if people do that and you use a term like should, the term should implies a standard that people should be living by.
No, for me, it means an obligation, as I've said.
Yeah, an
It's
obligation to a certain standard, though, right?
my obligation is to convince other people that they should adopt my point of view.
Okay. And is that just arbitrary?
It's my preference.
Okay, so it is just a preference.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
all. That's all anything is. So,
it's
and
like
also, I support Antifa because it's important to fight against fascism, right? And all they do is protest um, white nationalists and fascists. Um, they protest and object.
okay. So I guess all the stories that um, I've either read in articles or watched online about them, where they were doing negative fascist-like things, and they were asked about
Well,
how are they.
there have been conflicts. Yes, there's been like conflicts. There people have showed up, um, and there have been fights. Right? I mean that happens. I
Not
mean,
just that, people that come by themselves to speak at events have been hit with bike locks just trying to walk into a building. A girl that was wearing a Make Bitcoin Great Again hat, who was with Antifa, was mistakenly, they thought that she was wearing a Make America Great Again hat. She got pepper sprayed and punched.
yeah.
So it's, in fact, my problem with the left is that they created people like Donald Trump. You see, I didn't vote
No,
for either.
that's false. That I don't understand.
I knew you were going to say.
I don't understand what the reasoning
Well,
is.
let me tell you why. You see, I didn't vote for Donald Trump, and I didn't vote for anybody on the left or right ever, because I've never seen anybody who was capable of my vote or who deserved it. But what I do see is the more galvanized the left gets, the more we look for people like Donald Trump, who is basically the guy from Caddyshack, where he just comes in and he's like, Rodney Dangerfield, where he just comes in and he's like, oh, all these people over here suck. Is your life getting better or worse? Well, I'll come in there and shake things up. And everybody's like, yeah, go in there and shake everything up. And I know people on the left go, no, we didn't do it. But it's like whenever liberals were liberal in the 90s and they were just, against things like, don't tell us what we can do in our music videos. Everybody's like, they're pretty rational. But then whenever they got into, you have to if somebody wants to be a cat, you have to respect that they're a cat and things like that.
Yeah, that's not a thing. So the fact is that correlation is not causation. So the fact that there are liberals, it does not mean that they caused Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a consequence of racism of the right.
Well, why was he a Democrat for all of the previous years before running?
He's a GOP. Donald Trump represents the GOP base.
Okay, but let me ask you this. When he was interviewed about who he would make his vice president before he ever even thought about running, he said Oprah. He said my good friend Oprah would probably be my vice president, and then he voted Democrat. All the years before that, went to Hillary's wedding. They were friends up until he decided to shake things up, and he switched to being Republican when he voted Democrat pretty much his entire life.
Yeah, I don't think Donald Trump has politics. Okay. I don't think he's capable intellectually of having politics.
And I don't disagree.
Yeah,
I just think he's
that's unrelated to why he was elected. He was elected because he appealed to the racism of the GOP base.
You really believe that, though?
That's exactly what he did. Yeah.
Okay. Could it be the other way? Could you be
wrong? What other way?
Could you be wrong about that?
I could be wrong, but I don't know what the other way is. I don't know what that means.
The other way is that correlation isn't causation. So, for example,
that's what I said.
I know, I agree, but what I'm turning it around, I'm saying, because he says that we don't need illegals and things like that from Mexico, that seems super racist.
Well, he said that they were rapists and drug dealers, and they brought crime and illness into the country.
I agree, but
that's straight up racism.
Let me finish. Let me give you the other side. The other side, from what I hear from the right, is, yeah, but that statement wasn't about Mexicans. He said the Mexicans that are coming over illegally are being guided in by these coyotes. They're people who bring illegal people in for money, and they're bringing their rapists and their worst people.
Yeah, that's racist. Yeah, that's racism.
What if he would have said it? What if he were to have said that same thing about Canada's illegals?
That would also be a type of, that would be prejudice. It would be prejudice. It'd be bias, right? And technically, of course, Mexicans aren't a race, but people apply the word race to include any ethnic identity other than white.
So it's lost its meaning then.
Well, it's just been expanded. It just means anybody who's not like me.
Okay,
not white.
So if it means
you're not white, you're a member of a race. I mean, Jews.
So white isn't a race.
Italians used to be considered a race.
I know, I agree, but I'm saying. So you're saying that whites aren't a race, right?
No, right? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know
if
I'm committed to that or not.
That's fair. Because I hear a lot of this.
Race doesn't actually exist.
I agree, and I hear a lot of things on the right I disagree with, and on the left. Like on the left, I often hear everybody who's not white is a person of color, and I just wonder why isn't white a color? So, I mean, it just seems
Because they're in charge.
they're a minority in the world, though.
No, because they're in charge in the
They're in
United
charge of
States.
the
They're
United
not a
States.
whites are not a minority in the United States.
In the world, though, they are.
In the United States is where we're talking about.
Right, but I'm talking about globally with
No,
Mexicans and all these people.
we're talking about the United States
Okay.
and the people who helped elect Donald Trump, right?
Yeah, the same people though that also defeated the Nazis in World War II.
Donald Trump got elected
Uh-huh.
because he appealed to the bigotry, the prejudices, the homophobia, the sexism, and the racism of the GOP base. And that's how he got elected.
Okay. And because what about things like how Obama deported more people than all the other presidents? That wasn't racism, right?
Because it wasn't motivated by racism.
Yeah, but couldn't we assume people's motivations?
We can infer their motivations.
We can,
Yeah.
just like on a whimsically.
No, not whimsically, based on evidence.
Okay. And that evidence would be things like because he said that the illegals that are sneaking into the country are sending us their worst people
Yeah, that's evidence.
of racism, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, okay. I mean, we can move away from the politics. I wanted to get your opinion on those things because I find that I think that view is a little far biased to the left. Me being in the middle, I look at both sides and try to take in both and say, what can I make sense of on both sides? And
I think that you should continue not voting.
yeah,
I would like that very much.
okay.
Yeah. That's a good choice on your part.
Well, there's no. The only person I might have voted for was Ron Paul, but then even he couldn't convince me to vote for him.
Yeah, that you're not in the center. You think you are, but Ron Paul is on the extreme right.
Well, he's a libertarian. He said, "Let's get out of other countries."
Yeah, but he's on the extreme right.
Okay. Well, that could also. Here's the thing: from people that I listen to that's on the right, they think that what you would consider a moderate to center liberal is extreme far left. And the people that I listen to on the left think that Ben Carson is a far right winger. So
he is.
that's you're making my point for me.
No, you're not. No, I'm not. Somebody who's in the center, Obama was pretty much a centrist. He was either center or center right.
Okay, so he
was center right.
So he not only was schooled in Southside Chicago, he also was friends with people like Bill Ayers and Robert Byrd, who was in the KKK and all that.
No, Robert Byrd was not in the KKK.
He was a Grand Master.
He was a liberal Democrat.
Yes, and he was a Grand Master.
That was Bill a long Clinton. Time. Yeah, but he renounced that. This is a common slur and against and a smear that the far right likes to trot out about Robert Byrd.
Why has it got to be the far right? Why can't he have just been a Grand Master in the Ku Klux Klan and then he denounced it?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
So how does that relate to anything? That was when did he denounce it? What year?
I don't know what year, but I would say that when Bill Clinton was asked about it, he said, "Well, all Democrats were at that point in the KKK."
Yeah, all Democrats used to be traitors, Confederates who went to war against the United States.
Yeah.
So what?
And I guess you think
you understand that there was a great shift.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you.
There's a great shift in voting patterns.
That's what I was about to ask you.
Right?
You believe in the big switch thing, right?
I don't believe in it. It's a fact. It's a historical fact.
So let me just say this about it, and we don't have to talk about it if you don't want, but if everybody switched from one party to the other all at one time, why didn't they just keep their party and change their values?
Well, one, they didn't all switch at the same time.
Okay.
That was took over a long time. And the reason they switched is because the party changed and they didn't like the party anymore. So they went over to the GOP, which was more to their, which was willing to accept them. The reason that people in this, particularly in the South, but not expressly in the South, switched their voting behavior is because of civil rights legislation
Okay. And when was the civil rights legislation? About what year was that?
in the 60s.
Okay. Now, if that were true, and then that would mean that black people who voted almost all Republican before would have switched in the 60s as well, right?
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Okay. Well, it would stand to reason that if black people who have always been voting for Republicans because of abolishment of slavery and all this, if the
Well,
Democrats switched because of civil rights legislation, it would stand to reason that they would as well. But they actually switched mostly in the 30s because of the New Deal.
well, we're talking about the 60s and the change in voting behavior in amongst New Deal Democrats, right?
Yeah. So let's take the Dixiecrats.
The Dixiecrats.
Can you name name me two Dixiecrats that switched in the 60s from Democrat to Republican?
I don't. My history on that is not very good. I don't know.
Well, let me just mention this to kind of shake up your view, because that's what I like to do is kind of, I know I'm probably wrong with some of my views, but I like to shake up people's views. So Dinesh D'Souza, who I know you probably will not like, even though he's an Indian man from another country, and because he's,
I don't like him because he's a felon.
that's why?
That's partly why. He's a
So,
felon,
so you
and
don't,
he's a felon and a serial adulterer, and I think a con artist.
so you don't think that, so you think that felons should just not be liked? What about people who,
I think that that's a good reason. Well, the biggest reason I don't like him is because I think he is, at the very least, a narcissist, probably a sociopath, and he's a grifter. He's a grifter and a con artist and a felon.
so, so number one, I would say, I don't agree with you, because if I met some guy named Deshaun on the street who just said, "Yeah, I got a felony because I had this firearm on me and I shouldn't have," but
Sure, sure. Other things being equal, if somebody's character is such that I would be willing to set that aside. But
okay.
I don't
Now,
think
with that aside,
he has.
uh,
I don't think that he has
okay,
anything even remotely like
I know you don't.
character. I think he has without personal redeeming value at all. He is a
I know
snake
you do.
and a con art. He's a grifter.
I know you do, because he's so different from your point of view.
No, it's because he lies. He's a liar.
Okay, so but let me say this: what to just to kind of take up for him a little bit on his felony charge. What he was put in prison for, or in locked up in the penitentiary for, has never been, no one's ever been locked up for what he did, first of all, so there's no precedent for it. But second of all, somebody done the same thing as him with over 100,000 more dollars, and done it twice, was a repeat offender, and still didn't go to prison for it. But because he had just made a video about Obama, he went to prison for spending $10,000 over the campaign limit instead of over 100,000 like some of these other people. So he was.
So can you prove that it was because of the film that was made? So you're basically advancing a conspiracy theory?
No, I didn't make that up. That everybody has.
That's a conspiracy theory, right?
Well,
That
because it's a
he went
conspiracy
to
theory,
prison
doesn't make
not
it not true.
because he went to prison not because of the crime that he committed,
Mm-hmm.
which is a crime. It doesn't matter whether or
Yeah.
not anybody else was ever convicted of it. It's a
So,
crime, but no, you think it's because he made a film.
Well, let me ask you this: if you did a film about the president of the United States, and then you were convicted of a crime that nobody else has ever went to prison for, and you went to prison for it, and people have done it, repeat offenders who have done it in the hundreds of thousands instead of being 10,000 over, because you let one friend borrow money and you paid them back for their campaign, would you not think something was up with that?
The fact that everybody else is speeding around me doesn't mean that I can say to the officer, officer, everybody else is speeding.
Yeah, but if he has pulled over 3 people for doing the exact same thing as you, and maybe even going over the speed limit that you did, he has to be just and give you at least a reasonably close fine. That's what I'm saying. But with all
As
that,
far as I know, I don't know of anybody that's ever said that his crime, his sentencing was unjust.
oh yeah,
He committed a crime.
he's been on CNN and other places talking about it. So
Yeah, I'm sure he thinks it's unjust. Oh, I'm sure he does.
of course,
Of
he
course he
just made a
does.
video
He's a
criticizing the president.
con artist. Of course he thinks it's unjust.
Well, let me get to why I brought him up in the first place.
Ken Hovind doesn't think that that it was legitimate that he went to prison for tax evasion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's wrong.
Okay, well, let me get to why I brought up
Because he's another grifter. He's another grifter, and a liar and a cheat, just like Dinesh D'Souza.
Okay.
These are people these are people without moral character at all.
They
completely lack moral character.
Okay.
Kent Hovind, Dinesh D'Souza, they are grifters.
We're just gonna disagree on their character, because so I'm gonna have
You think he has a redeeming character? What is
let me just make a quick comparison.
Dinesh D'Souza.
Let me make a comparison, and I would just say Elizabeth Warren is a terrible person. She has terrible character. What would you say to that? You would totally disagree?
Why?
Well,
Why? Why would you say that?
For one, she lied on her she got her position at the university about lying about her Native American heritage because her grandmother said they had high cheekbones. That's been documented.
Yeah, so how is that a lie?
Because she put that she was part Native American.
Yeah, how is that a lie?
Because of affirmative action, she got a position.
Yeah.
About lying about.
But how is it a lie?
What if I were to say, well, because I got rhythm, I think I'm part black. You can't do that.
How is it a lie for Warren to have put on that she was part Indian when she was raised to believe that her and her entire family were part Indian?
Well, I have people. Well,
she was raised, and her entire family, even if they were simply mistaken, if it is true, but they are part Indian, aren't they?
Who? Warren?
The Warrens.
No, they're not. Yeah. No, her DNA research. They have shown that she's not even close. But I do have Native Americans in my family that go to the reservation and get the benefits and everything, and they find it personally offensive. Just like Rachel Dolezal, she basically turned herself into a mixed girl, married a black man and got mixed children, and she put her, she frays her hair and she tans and everything. And then when it came out that she looked like Marsha Brady and her family like the Brady Bunch, she was ashamed of her family.
So Elizabeth Dolezal.
No, Rachel Dolezal.
Rachel Dolezal is mentally ill.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
You don't think she's race or whatever?
She's mentally, she has delusions.
Okay. Well, then you agree with me on that. So
and you were wrong about Elizabeth Warren.
See, that my point was that you would never agree with me about.
No, because I appeal to the facts and not to your conspiracy theories. Elizabeth Warren released the results of her DNA tests, and they show strong evidence of Native American ancestry dating back 6 to 10 generations.
Okay, but I actually see the exact opposite evidence.
But I'm pointing to actual evidence and not your gossip that you've heard on YouTube.
No, I'm not talking about just gossip on YouTube. I'm talking about when I looked up the evidence online. It
Did you
said that,
see her DNA results?
yes, and it said that she was like 1/32 or something like that of a percent, some
Yeah.
native, way down the line.
So she does have native ancestry.
If you consider that native ancestry, it's like saying that I'm black because I have African ancestry.
Oh, yeah. At one time in America, it was a one drop rule. If you have a one drop of black ancestry in your blood, then you're black. Yes. Under Jim Crow, you would be black.
Yeah, those. Well, let's get back to what we were talking about, because the Jim Crow laws by um were done by the Democrats, and you said there was a big switch. But what I was getting to with Dinesh D'Souza before we kind of got off track there was that he has I think it's a $50,000
So
reward that if anybody can produce a list of more than one Dixiecrat that switched during the 60s after civil rights, he would pay them that. But because
that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. So to continue with Elizabeth Warren, Warren's DNA analysis was conducted by Stanford University researcher Carlos Bustamante, who found that the vast majority of Warren's lineage is of European ancestry, but he also writes that the results strongly support the existence of an unadmixed Native American ancestor in the individual's pedigree, likely in the range of 6 to 10 generations ago. Um, yes, the Cherokee Nation does not accept her as being sufficient
okay, well
for
let
her
me
to be a member of Cherokee Nation, but it
exactly
nevertheless is the case that she does have Cherokee ancestry. So she did not lie.
okay.
Did she? So did she
Warren
lie?
herself lied.
Did Elizabeth Warren lie?
Warren herself lied or exaggerated her heritage,
Did
knowing
so?
full well that her
Is
contention.
exaggeration? It's
Well,
not an
let me
exaggeration.
finish.
Is it a lie? Did she lie on her application?
Let me finish. Um, she latched on to that history to gain traction in an academic
So,
field that was searching for more
did
diverse
she
candidates.
lie?
Well, let me
Did
finish.
she lie?
Let's say that I said no.
Just answer the question. Did she lie?
I said, let's say that I say no, but then I can make a
Well,
different.
let's say that you actually answer. Did Elizabeth Warren lie?
Well, I'm going to go with no so we can move on with the conversation.
Well, the DNA shows that she does have Cherokee ancestry, even though
Okay.
it is very small. It is real.
Okay. Well, let me go.
So the question is, did she lie? Yes
Okay.
or no?
I'm going to go with no for now. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to say this, then I'm going to move on to a different point.
So you're going to change it later on, right?
Yeah, I'm
So
going to make a new claim.
you're going to go right back later on.
I'm just going to make a new claim right now.
Yeah, you're just going to make a new claim.
Okay.
You're just going to ignore this.
Well, I'm conceding you that point. I'm conceding it to you. That's what you do in debate, so you can move forward to a greater point. She latched onto this negligible history to gain traction in an academic field.
Can you prove that?
Well, let me finish before.
Because that's intent. Can you prove that she had that intent?
I can if I don't get a chance to finish my point. She did this to gain traction in an academic field that was searching for more diverse candidates. We know that the second option is more probable after the prospective presidential candidate decided to make a huge deal out of the DNA test. She's proved in reality.
That doesn't follow. How does that follow?
Well, let me finish.
Well, no, let's stick with this. You're saying that when she applied to go to the university for a scholarship, that she knew that she was going to be accused of this in the future when she ran ran as president or ran for Senate? Is that what you're saying?
No, let me finish. As the Boston Globe, who is no fan of the right, put, Warren's decision begins by contending that there's a strong evidence of Warren's Native American ancestry dating back 6 to 10 generations, which creates the impression that she has Native American families littered all over the past 100 years.
Yes, that's been verified.
But let me finish.
So that's true.
But let me finish, and then you can.
That's been verified. So she didn't lie, did
Let,
she?
you're filibustering. Let me finish, and then you can respond. But in truth, we learned that it's possible that Warren's great great grandmother was partially Native American. That would make her around or less than 1/32nd American Indian. It's a far cry from the reasonable threshold to embrace minority status for a job that she started in the 1990s.
Of
But back
course,
before walking her claims back were even tested.
was DNA evidence?
And,
Was DNA available at that time?
not mass as it is now.
No, it wasn't. And in fact, all she had to go on
Yeah, so she could have been
was
proven
simply the
wrong.
fact that her family and herself believed that they had Cherokee ancestry. And it's true. It wasn't a lot, but they believed it. They didn't have DNA evidence back then. And what is wrong with somebody taking advantage of an opportunity?
Well, what was wrong with Rachel Dolezal becoming part of the NAACP and trying to she's persuading them that she was black, and people said they didn't even know she wasn't.
Because Rachel has some serious mental issues going on. You look into her family issue, there was a lot of abuse and a lot of issues, mental issues with Rachel, right? So she was a very confused young woman. I think she adopted the African American identity because of the abuse from her family, and that was her way of, right, adopting a new identity to get away from that. But I don't know. She simply could have been mentally unstable and possibly delusional, right? So she has issues. That's a different thing than
Yeah, but
that's completely different than Elizabeth Warren, who's perfectly normal, but was simply raised with in a family,
okay,
and
well,
the family believed that they had Cherokee
okay,
history,
so you could say that she
and that
wasn't.
was true.
You can say that she wasn't lying about it because she thought that she was just misled by her parents. And here's let me just point
She
out one more
wasn't
thing.
misled by her parents. Her parents believed it too.
Well, okay, well, they might have believed it too, but let me point out one thing. There's no way here's an article here that says it's talking about this, and it says there's no way to break down the DNA into regions or tribes because the data that's not available from Native Americans because of fear of exploitation. The DNA tests merely rely on some guesswork by referencing the DNA people from South
Yeah.
America. And as the Sean Davis points out, according to the New York Times, on average, the average white person in America is nearly double the amount of American Indian DNA as Elizabeth Warren, who claims Cherokee. And this is
So what?
completely
So
credulous
what?
because if that means that the average white person should be able to just go claim that they're Native
No,
American.
it doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't imply that at all. There's no implication there at all. It simply means that she didn't know, and it means that the DNA evidence, even as it is inconclusive. We can't say anything about it. She simply believed it because her family was aware of members who were Cherokee, and so they believed that they had Cherokee heritage in their lineage, in their family. And she's right.
But if you look at Elizabeth Warren and you just look at her and her family, do you think that that was my whole point about Dinesh D'Souza, why we wouldn't agree, and the reason why I brought her up is because I knew that you would defend her because you agree with her ideal.
No, that's not why I'm defending her. I'm because of facts.
If you were to look at her and her family, would you say it's ethical for her to try and go out and beat some other Native American scholar out of that job? It is
I
unethical
think
just
that
by looking at her.
I think, yeah, I don't, yeah, that's called racism, dude.
That's racism.
Yes. You
Racism is
judging people by their appearance.
that's prejudice.
That's racism. Yeah.
Racism
Yes.
is if
Yes.
you think your
Same
race is
thing.
superior to others.
Yes. The same thing. It's
I
just
am white, so I can't I can't be racist to whites in that
yeah, you
way.
can. Yeah, you can.
So I can say that whites are superior to whites.
You can think that whites are superior. That's
To
racism. Yes.
whites, she is white.
Not two whites. What are you talking about?
I'm
So the
saying,
point is, we don't judge people by their appearance. And in when did she apply? Was it the 70s, the 60s? At that time, she thought she had Cherokee history, ethnic. She was partly ethnic Cherokee. That there in their family's history, they were partly Cherokee. So she was perfectly in her rights to put down on the application that she's partly Cherokee. There's nothing wrong with that.
okay, well, let me just point out one more thing about what you brought up about that DNA. It says the credulous reporter who wrote down Warren's DNA piece did not do the math correctly, and this is before getting into the particular test, which didn't even use American Indian DNA to compare it to. It was garbage. 6 generations removed is 1/64th. 10 removed is 1/1024th. So they didn't even try. They just gave her, the benefit of the doubt. She is one uh, 1/1024th, maybe, if they did everything right. And it wasn't not in the 70s, it was in
Who
the
is this?
90s.
Who is this?
Who is what?
Who are you quoting?
This is well, they've quoted a few people from here. One was a scholar from the Boston Globe, which they're calling
So
unskeptical because
yeah,
they're a left group. And
I'll
one
go
is
with Stanford University over the Boston Globe.
who was the Stanford? Who was the person from Stanford University?
Carlos Bustamante.
Okay, well,
Warren's DNA analysis was conducted by Stanford University. So I'll take their word over the shit journalists that
well,
you're quoting.
I would just say that because I have Native Americans in my family, that they
You don't know
often,
that.
yeah, I do.
How can you say that? Have you had a DNA test?
I can say that because my cousins go to the reservation to get their.
Too bad. Well, so what? You need to take a DNA test, and
No, no, I'm not claiming that I do.
even then, you
I'm not
can't
even
know
claiming that I do.
because DNA evidence doesn't take into account tribal
Yeah.
affiliation. So you can't
Well,
know. You can't claim that you are partly Cherokee.
I'm not claiming that. That
Yes,
wasn't my
you
claim.
just did.
No, I said that there are Native Americans in my family, whether I am or not. They
Well,
have
you
their
can't
lineage.
claim that. How dare you claim that? You don't know that. Unless you have taken a DNA test, you can't know. So you shouldn't say anything about it.
I'm
How
not claiming
dare
that
you?
I am.
How dare you claim to be part Cherokee? You
You're
don't know it.
misunderstanding. I didn't claim that. I said maybe I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not, but I do have cousins that are, and that we know that because they're more than half, and that they get reservation benefits like
So
unlike.
I think that if you were to apply for a scholarship, you would be justified in ticking that box, just like Elizabeth Warren was justified in ticking that box.
You really think so?
She also
So,
she also had people in her family who were Cherokee
well,
that
I also have
that they
DNA.
knew about,
I have
and
more African
you were
DNA.
both justified in ticking
Okay.
that.
Well, I have more African DNA than I do
And
Native
so
American.
then you can tick that box also.
So I can check African American
If you
on
want to,
the.
I don't care.
Okay, so I can misuse social programs for African Americans
How would you be misusing it?
because there's only a certain amount of African Americans and minorities that get into certain schools and jobs because of their race.
If
And
you're if you can show that you have the requisite qualifications, whatever
no,
standards
I
they
just
have
believe it
today, yeah, that's
because my
fine.
family.
If that's all it is, but today they have standards, I'm sure. And so
Yeah, but
if
every
you can meet
human,
those standards, if you can meet those standards,
well, every human has African descent in their DNA. So everybody could technically apply for that.
that's not what we mean today by African Americans. That's not what we mean. Yes, everybody came out of Ethiopia. Yes, we all evolved and spread out and moved,
So
right?
I guess that's what my whole point was, is that you see, people cannot bridge the gap between what they believe and that which contradicts their beliefs. And I'm not just saying you, I'm saying that even with me, sometimes whenever I believe in God and I hear someone like you say, we know that the Christian God is not real.
Yes, we do.
It is so foreign to me that it makes me think that you're not credible because you don't even consider it. And so, in the same way, that's why you have to take up for Warren around me, is because I don't find her credible in the least. And with her rhetoric, it just seems like she's a shill for people like George Soros and others. But
Yeah, the globalist Jew, huh? They have their tentacles spreading around the globe, do they? The global Jew?
is he a Jew?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. I just
Yeah,
know that he's a
that's what
far left.
globalism is the stand-in among the paranoid right for Jew
Really?
for the Jewish question.
I've only heard that on the left.
What do you think of the Jewish question?
I've heard
What should we do about the Jews? What should we do with them?
I'm a fan of the Jews. But I would say this: I worship a Jew. But what I would say is this: is that I've actually heard on the left that Zionist Jews are trying to take over the world. I actually haven't heard that from their
Oh,
mouth.
well, Zionism is completely different than Judaism.
Yeah, so there we go. There's the other side of the story. Yeah, that's
Right. So
completely different.
Zionism is imperialist political.
Globalist Jews, right?
No, they're not globalists. They're Zionists. That's a different. You
But
don't
they're
know.
not
Do
globalists.
you not know what Zionism means?
Yes, but you're saying they're not globalists, though.
Right. They're not. Do you not know what Zionism means? It
Yes,
means it's an imperial. It's a sort of Jewish nationalism, right?
yeah, but you're saying they're not globalists.
uh, Zionism is not globalist. No, of course not. It's kind of the opposite, isn't it?
No.
It's proclaiming that there should be a homeland for Jews. That's kind of the opposite of globalism, isn't it?
Okay, you don't think there should be though, right?
What?
You don't think there should be?
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, okay, I'm just asking you because it
I
sounded like.
say Jewish nationalism is a racist.
What about black nationalism?
Yeah, I think they're just as crazy as white nationalists.
Okay, so you're consistent on that. Most leftists, I'm telling you, I've had these conversations with so many people. Most left people on the left, they will not admit that. They'll say, "Well, black nationalists, man, they've got other things that are going on."
I'm generally against nationalism. I think it's
Okay,
so whether it's
you got to understand
Jewish
when.
nationalism, aka Zionism, black nationalists or white nationalists or whatever nationalists, I think that's crazy. I think it's bad. It's a bad idea.
Okay, but you got to understand. Did you come from? Were you religious growing up or no?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
were
was
you?
Lutheran.
Were
I
the
was
people you
Lutheran.
grew up around on the right at all?
I would imagine that there were people around me who were generally right,
Okay,
but
so
generally not. It was a relatively liberal church. It seemed to me to be liberal times and stuff, but I suppose, you don't always know the politics of the people.
yeah, but you
Grow
would
up
say
with.
generally the religious people you grew up around were probably on the right. So,
No, on the left.
oh, you think the religious people?
Liberal, liberal Lutherans are. I came from a liberal Lutheran um, church denomination,
Okay.
right? So it's generally left leaning, I would say.
Yeah, but
Comparison.
left-leaning Christians are not left-leaning like you are, right?
I
They're
don't know. There's plenty of Christians who are further to the left than I am. There's plenty
okay.
of Christians.
So
Christian doesn't imply anything about your politics.
it
You
doesn't imply things like what you would call sexual repression and things like that. It doesn't say don't have sex before marriage and things that are more on the right and like.
It would depend. That's just an interpretation, right? So
Is it?
different people interpret things differently. Of course they do.
Yeah, but that's like saying quantum mechanics isn't true because they're different interpretations. It's like one of them's true.
Well, quantum mechanics is science, and religion is
Yeah,
is
but
an
we're talking about.
ideology. It doesn't. religion
interpretation.
doesn't make statements about reality. Um,
It doesn't.
actually does.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
How
it doesn't.
how could you know that?
Well, religion is a belief system. Science
Yeah,
is not.
just well, I would disagree with that. I would say that science is a belief system.
Well, it is the belief system in the larger sense that
Right. So is
that
religion.
things are no.
You said it was.
Religion is a belief system in that it is the kind of belief which is people believe things in spite of evidence to the contrary. Science believes things because of the evidence. So faith is belief without evidence,
See,
and that's what
not only
that's.
do I totally disagree with you about that, you sound like Aaron Ra.
Oh,
Uh,
I love Aaron Ra. Yeah, he's great.
uh, maybe you should watch.
You should. Well, you probably won't get to debate him because he's gone back to school and he's very busy.
Well,
So
he wouldn't
I
debate
wouldn't
me
try.
anyway.
I wouldn't try to debate him. He's very
Um,
busy.
I
He
don't
won't
have
have
to
time.
though, because he just debated a scholar. And I did a debate review of it on my channel. It's my only video up right now. And in it, he makes so many mistakes, like on his definition of faith. He's asked by a scholar that has been he said, faith is believing where there's no evidence. And he says, can you name one scholar that believes that? Any epistemologist that believes that?
Boghossian, Peter Boghossian.
Boghossian is not an epistemologist.
Yes, he is. That's exactly what he is.
No, if
Yes,
I'm not mistaken, he's a philosopher,
yes,
but he's not a professional epistemologist, is he?
yes. That's what he is.
I could be wrong on that, but he didn't have a single example. He just believed it basically on faith. And not only that, he said, Christians have been arguing with me for 20 years that it's wrong. And he goes, yeah, well, there might be a reason. And then he says, okay, well, I personally, that's what I'm telling you. That's what the definition of faith is. And he says, man, I'm a professional epistemologist. I'm a philosopher. I was given a grant to study faith for almost 4 years, where I had over 58 entries and not a single person said what you said it is. Even the atheists don't believe that.
No, that's irrelevant. What
It's
other people?
irrelevant
I don't know what you're appealing to, but it's irrelevant.
I'm appealing to scholarship versus you just
Yeah.
want to believe that's the definition.
Well, it's a proposed definition. I think it's a good one. That
I know you do
it's
because
descriptive.
it agrees with your beliefs.
No, it's descriptive of how actual Christians actually, how their faith actually functions.
I disagree with that.
Whether it's Christian, Judaism, or Islam or Hindu, people believe what they believe in spite of any evidence to the contrary.
I disagree. Jesus said, beware. There are people that come to you in sheep's clothing, but they're inwardly they're wolves. So he's saying, challenge it. Beware of things. Yeah,
But
that's
they
not
don't.
believe just because.
Christians don't believe that. That's not why they. I'm saying that's as a descriptive matter. That is not why theists in general believe what they believe.
We're not talking about this. You said Christians believe that was.
Well, I'm generalizing it to
Okay.
to the theistic position.
Okay. Well, maybe that definition of
religions.
maybe that definition of faith might work for Judaism or Islam, but
Why do you think? Why do you think that Muslims believe what they do based on the evidence?
some of them
I
people
would
don't
think.
just all.
You don't think that all of them believe what they do based on evidence?
I haven't met all of them, so I couldn't say. That's just clumsy.
Well, would you say that about the majority of Christians believe what they do, their faith is based on evidence?
Yes.
And would you say the same for Muslims?
Yes.
And for Hindus and for Jews and for whatever other religion, the people believe based on evidence?
Yes. Now, what I would qualify that with is it may not be great evidence.
It can't possibly be great evidence, can it?
Well, it could be, but if, let's say I were to speak to a Hindu, and he were to say, I would say, so do you believe in Brahma based on evidence? And he were to say, yeah, the evidence is everybody in my entire country believes it. Now, that's not good evidence, okay? And then maybe he says, and it's, there's somebody that, there's a guy that I know that's a super good scholar and he believes in it. Well, that's evidence, but it's not really good evidence. It's anecdotal evidence. So I'm not saying that it's always good, but then you might
Is the
have.
Bible anecdotal evidence?
Is the Bible anecdotal evidence? No. It's just a
Really?
collection of, no, it's just
It's not anecdote,
not in the sense that you're using it.
right?
An anecdote,
So it is anecdotal, right?
no.
Do,
An
do
anecdote,
we have the original manuscripts?
yes. No, you saying the
No, we
original
don't.
manuscripts? We have the original text, but not the original manuscripts.
Right. We don't have the original manuscripts.
Well, here's the problem with that. Atheists
And
say,
we
well,
don't know who actually wrote them either.
well, let
We
me.
have no idea who wrote the books.
Okay, well, if you let me
They don't have names attached to them. It's
allow
just,
me to respond.
but it's just tradition in church that they're attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Allow me
right?
to respond. Not only do we have, as Bart Ehrman agreed with in his debate with Dr. Daniel Wallace, we have over 1 million quotations of the New Testament from just early church fathers. Just from them, even if we had 0 manuscripts, we could combine their writings and make over the New Testament easily. Not only that, the early church fathers told us who wrote the books because they quote directly from them and say, as the Gospel of Luke says, and things like this. So we do know who wrote them because of these people. And then if you want to say,
But that's just hearsay.
Well, let me finish.
That's hearsay, though. That's hearsay.
But let me finish, because you might say, yeah, but these guys hundreds of years later, how are they going to know? That's just hearsay.
It is hundreds. It was those sources are hundreds of years later, aren't they?
I'm going to directly contradict you. No, they're not.
But I'm correct, aren't I? They are hundreds. We're talking 100 years later, 200, 300 years later. Right?
I was going to say the exact opposite. We actually have quotes from people like Polycarp, who was a direct disciple of the Apostle John. We have his letters. We not only have his letters, we have his disciples' letters, where he says things like, like he wrote a letter to Pope Victor, and he said, listen, I'm getting to be an old man. I don't really know even what I ate yesterday, but I'll tell you this. I remember Polycarp coming, and we'll sit under that big oak tree, and the Apostle John would come out and teach us. And I tell you what he would do if he heard what you just said. He would throw up his hands and stomp his feet and say, God, why would you ever let me see this kind of heresy in the church? We don't have hundreds of years later. We have people that are contemporaneous with apostles giving us quotations. So that's what I'm saying is atheists don't realize this because they're so used to the Gospels don't have names on them. Church tradition started.
Of Polycarp, all we have is his epistle to the Philippians.
There's actually 2 works attributed to Polycarp.
No, but that's all we have is just the epistle.
What about the martyrdom of Polycarp? It's a book.
Yeah, obviously it wouldn't have been written during his lifetime, would it?
No, yes, it would have been. It's a work.
No, definitionally, since he martyred.
No, I'm not saying. I'm not saying he wrote it. I'm saying it was written. You're saying was it written before he died? No. But if you mean like contemporaneously around the time of his life, then yes. But not only that, we have all his students' writings, and we have the writings of his teacher John the Apostle.
100, but they were all 100 years after Christ.
No, they weren't.
Yeah, they're dated in the 130s to 140s.
No, what about the Bishop of Antioch? He was dated. The Clement Bishop of Rome was dated 95. I mean, we have people going. We have
40 years. 40 years after Christ.
Yeah, you said hundreds, and I'm saying no.
Polycarp is 100.
We have people. Yeah, but he might have been 100 after Christ died. But the Apostle John's still alive and setting up churches in countries, and he's his direct student.
People didn't live very long. That the lifespan was in the 30s or 40s. So
Let me make this point.
so we're
The
talking a
Apostle
couple
John,
generations. We're talking a couple generations after the death of Christ. It hasn't been a couple generations after Elvis died, and we have already got people thinking that he's still alive.
while that may be true,
So
we
what I'm saying is that mythification, that process happens very quickly.
while that may be true, we don't have Elvis's best friend alive today to tell us exactly what happened, which we did have the Apostle John. He established churches for 20 years, and Polycarp and others were his direct students, pupils.
So do you
He set
think
up churches for 20 years, taught these
yeah,
churches what he believed.
it's still flimsy evidence. The
Okay.
evidence for the Book of Mormon is much better.
A modern contemporary book.
The evidence for the Book of Mormon and for its
Well,
divine
here's the thing with that.
revelation, right?
Okay, well, here's the
Is
thing with that.
far better than the evidence for the Bible.
Okay, well, not only would most atheist scholars disagree with you, Bart Ehrman definitely would disagree with you, as it's put in his debate with James White. We have over 6,000 copies of manuscripts, okay? And those manuscripts, even though they don't all agree, he says, if it would have been like the Muslim Uthman, who destroyed all of the manuscripts except for the one he thought was correct, we would only have one manuscript. Having a lot of manuscripts is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And as Daniel Wallace put it, if people have added to the text, like Bart Ehrman and others say that they have added, like the Comma Johannium and some other verses, like the woman caught in adultery, it's not that we don't have the original Bible. It's that we have 102 pieces to a puzzle that's only 100 pieces. So that doesn't show anything.
So my point, though, is that I think a Mormon has a much better case because they have a far better historical account of the origin of the golden tablets, right?
Disagree.
Right. So it's much better than that for the Bible, which is quite flimsy.
I disagree. And first of all, Jesus was known as a teacher, a rabbi, things like this. Joseph Smith was known as a con artist. He actually got in trouble. So I wouldn't say that they have better. They're more probable to have better evidence because all they have going for them is that they're modern. But with that, they also have the fact that their leader left behind a trail of being a con artist. So I totally disagree with you on that as well. But I don't expect you to agree that the Bible's totally reliable.
I don't think it's reliable at all.
I wouldn't expect you to. You disagree with it.
No, that's not why I don't think it's reliable.
Yeah, but let's say that everything in it were true, just to pretend for a sec, okay? It would directly refute your worldview, right? It would directly contradict the things that you believe.
I don't think that the things that could be true. Do you believe?
I'm just asking as a
Do you believe that when Jesus passed away on the cross, that the graves opened and the dead walked around?
Sure.
So zombie apocalypse. You believe in that? You believe
I wouldn't put. I wouldn't.
The dead can walk around, can rise out of their graves and walk around.
Sure. I'm sure that they could. Yes. Now you might say, you see, most Christians will go, well, here's the thing, and then no, I just take the claim and say yes, and then I explain. Here's the deal. If you believe that too, if a supernatural being exists, because that would be trivially easy in a trivial thing. You're saying
there isn't anything an omnipotent God couldn't do, right?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is
belief in an omnipotent God could justify any belief.
Okay, but here's what I'm getting at, is when atheists give these type of scenarios, they go, you know the laws of gravity, and you really believe somebody walked on water? I'm saying, yes, I'm saying, okay, that claim is stupid.
Which is more
From,
likely? Which is more
let me
likely?
finish though, because
But
this is it's gonna make sense to you. Of course, that claim that he walked on water or that he turned water into wine, you can go, you know, all the chemical reactions that would have had to happen. Yeah, if the claim of the Bible was that it was a natural process which changed that wine, it is a stupid claim. But it's not that. It's that the person who invented water walked on water. That's trivially simple to understand and believe.
that's not the question. The question is it more likely? What's more likely?
But here's the thing is,
What's, excuse me, just
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
formulate this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is more likely, that the account that the dead rose from their graves and walked around Jerusalem, was it Jerusalem or Rome? I forget.
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Hmm.
Which is more likely, that that was a story that was invented, or that
Hmm.
actually happened? If you came across a book
Okay.
and it had just that account in it,
Hmm.
would you put that book in the fiction section or nonfiction?
Okay. Now you're going to the library experiment, right? Before I answer the library test, let me go back to your original question, which was, is it more probable that Christ rose from the dead or that people walked around from the dead and stuff like that?
Or walked on water, turned
Yes.
water into
Right,
wine?
right.
Yes.
Here's the thing. You got to understand that from debating atheists for as long as I have, that question comes up so much. So it's not even a hard question for me. You cannot take a miracle claim and then say, well, it's the least probable thing that could happen. You're telling me
Why not?
that, let me finish. You're telling me that a miracle is improbable? The definition of a miracle is that it doesn't occur usually. Like, it's
No, the
so,
definition of a miracle is that it is a violation of the laws of the of
that's,
physics, right?
yeah, that's, no,
Yes,
that's
that's the
wrong.
definition of a miracle. Yes.
Let me tell you why that's wrong, though. That was held by people like um, David Hume. The reason why that's wrong is because not only did he not understand calculus and other probability calculus and other things that go into it. Let me give you one example that'll solve it for you. Let's say that 100 times out of 100, an apple falls from a tree at 9.8 meters per second squared and it hits the ground. Now, if I were to add my hand and a personal agent were to add their hand under the tree and snatch that apple, do you say that the personal agent changed the law of nature, or do you say that something new was added into the system? You see, that's what we have with the miracle, is that it's not
Yeah.
that Christ changed the law of gravity to walk on water. It's that since he created the law of gravity, he doesn't suspend the law, he just walks on water. He could have done it anyway. He could have made his body light as a
And
feather.
that's still a violation of the laws of physics,
I disagree.
because it includes, um, you can't, like, add energy to the system. You can't add events that
No,
come.
no, 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 no. It says that matter cannot be created or destroyed, right? That's what you're talking about, right?
Well, I'm saying that yeah, it's what is it? The laws of thermodynamics, that
Right, that
right.
that matter can't be created or destroyed, right?
Well, matter can be destroyed. It can be converted into energy. So
Okay.
yeah, it can be.
Okay, so that refutes your claim right there.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so what is
Because
the claim?
I'm not saying that matter can't be created or destroyed. I'm saying that you can't have um, a break in the conservation laws. It has to be conserved.
It does for a natural person that only has natural means. Does science's laws only apply to nature? Something that is supernatural, it does not apply to. Now, you can, gripe about that, but it makes sense logically that, I just don't take the claim. I don't buy it. And now let's get to the library experiment. What I wanted to do with Doug, although Pine Creek Doug, he would not debate me. I sent him, just like, take for example, Tom Jump. I'm not a super big fan of Tom Jump, but I like him because he is willing to debate. So I'm debating him tomorrow because he's willing to debate. I sent Pine Creek an email as well and said, hey, listen, I've done debates, a modern day debate with one of your buddies, Jim Majors, and I'm debating Tom, and I'd like to debate you too. And he said, no, you know what? I'm getting kind of tired of debating Christians. It's just dishonest. Like, and I said, well, look, you don't even have to debate me on their channel. Bring me on your channel and you can put me through all your experiments, like the library experiment and all. And he said, no, I don't think so. If I were to do it, I wouldn't debate you on somebody else's channel. I would bring you on my channel. And then he never responded to me. So, first of all, I'd say he doesn't want to know the answer to his experiment, but I'll give it to you. So let me just run it in reverse. I like to give people the experiment in reverse. So I'm going to give you a scenario that's in a book. You pick it up, and the book says, a long time ago, in a place far, far away, a sea of foam exploded into everything, and non-life evolved into life, and evolved from plant life to animal life to human life, and became conscious and adaptive, and became conscious to the point that it can reflect on the fact that all of it happened. Would you put that in the fiction or nonfiction category?
Since all of those claims have solid evidence, and this is just standard
No, you're
science
just
as we know
reading
it
it.
today. No,
You're reading it in a book, remember?
It's backed up with evidence, though.
No, but I'm saying in his experiment, you don't get he don't like you to go into why the Bible could be, true or whatever. He likes to just say, no, it's in a different book. It's a claim by some other person that wrote it. You're just reading that non-life developed into life by a sea of foam, exploding into everything there is today, and evolving with consciousness so that it can reflect on the fact that it all happened and all this. You take that book and go, oh yeah, that definitely goes in the fiction category. I mean, in the nonfiction.
Oh, it has. We have evidence to support all of those claims. So
that life can come from non-life.
Yeah.
What evidence is there for that?
Well, we can watch it happening.
How?
They put the chemicals together, and DNA self-assembles.
Yeah, and by self-assembles, you said first you started with they put together things, and as Simon Conway Morris said, the hand of the experimenter becomes the hand of God. Like, you can't just leave things out in the open because and then go.
I don't understand that. Scientists are not gods.
Yeah, but you're saying, oh, an intelligent agent put together chemicals and then helped it evolve into life. It's like,
the point is, if regardless of whether somebody empties the contents of a test tube into a reaction vessel, it doesn't matter. It does matter.
Independent.
No, it's irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant because here's the thing. Even if you had the right amount of proteins to create a single cell organism, that organism not only has to survive, and it has to find some source of what you might call nutrients, let's say. It has to be capable of replication, be capable of adaptation and all these other things because of all of the forces around it that wants to kill it. And so in the lab, you can put it in a test tube and move it away from all these things, but you can't say that it could have naturally occurred at the early Earth's atmosphere or any type of earlier primordial atmosphere.
So do you think that if I put two chemicals together in the lab and they explode, that I cannot infer that if those two chemicals come into contact with each other in nature, that they will not explode?
I would say that
they would, wouldn't they?
They would if they
Right.
were
So
in
the
the
hand,
if they were
the
in the
hand of the
controlled
scientist
if
is,
they were in a controlled environment like you made
no,
them in.
no, all you have to do is put them together. All they have to be is be in proximity with each
All
other,
right. Well, let's say
and they'll
okay.
explode, right? So
Well, let me give you an
the
example
hand of
that
the scientist is irrelevant.
Well, let me give you an example that contradicts that. Let's say I were to take two chemicals, or let's say I were to take fire and gas, and I would put them together in a laboratory and they exploded. Okay. Now, let's say that I were to take that same thing with an atmosphere where there's no oxygen. Would they explode? No. You see, that's what I'm saying is you're in a controlled environment.
That doesn't refute what I said.
Yeah, because you're not
Because they
taking
have
into account
because,
the environment and
no,
the
I am
scientists.
taking it into account.
I just
It's irrelevant. When I put like two reactive chemicals together, they will explode. That is the environment, right? I'm not discounting the fact that there needs to be oxygen present. With some chemical reactions, there does not need to be oxygen present.
I would just say
It's
that,
simply the two chemicals coming together, and the hand of the chemist is irrelevant.
well, I would just say that you're not going to take my word for it, I know. So I would just say that I can just rely on the studies that I've read where scientists say, "Oh, okay, so you got a creative agent to create life in the in out
Yeah,
of."
that's irrelevant. The
I
hand of the researcher, of the scientist, is irrelevant because the chemicals will react whether they were poured from a test tube or whether they come together out in the ocean or on the land or some other environment.
so
They're
it just
going
makes
to
one
react regardless of who put them there.
it just makes one wonder why we don't get those lives spontaneously growing without being in a test tube in a lab.
But we do.
I
As
don't
I
think so.
said, well, you haven't been keeping up with the latest research. We can, in fact, put certain the conditions correctly, and DNA will spontaneously, well, not DNA, but RNA, which is the precursor to DNA,
Right. I
will
understand.
spontaneously generate, right? And
Yeah, but
you put lipids together in the correct conditions, and lipids will spontaneously form a membrane, right? A little corpuscle, and it won't even be alive. It will just be a capsule of lipids, and
oh, it won't be alive.
the silicates and the well, no, but
Okay.
that just shows that that structure just self-assembles, and the the structure of clays
First of all, let's just
form, can form the basis for our RNA to form, right?
well, let me just say this.
So it could easily have been the case that you had clays and shallow pools, and with a lot of early chemicals in a reductive atmosphere of the time, and RNA could have spontaneously formed. So yes, so yes,
So you think that life comes from non-life?
life isn't a thing.
Okay.
Life isn't a thing. It's a process. Do you think that do you think that if I stick a hose into you, I could suck the life out of you? You don't have life in you.
No, yeah, I do
Life
actually.
is no, you don't.
If you tied a hose around my throat and I ran out
Yeah.
of breath, I do believe it.
No, but could I transfer your life to somebody else?
Not yet.
I'm a mad scientist. I'm a mad scientist, and I've got wires and connections and hoses, and I can connect from life, and I can take your life, and I can put it over into this Frankenstein, right? I can do that. That makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
I did see that on a movie recently,
Yeah,
but
but
I
does
would.
that make sense? But does it make sense?
I think if I asked a scientist, he would say we will be able to do that.
No, but can you do that? No, we'll never be able to do that.
Okay.
Do you know why?
That-
Do you know
I'll,
why? Because life is not a substance. It is the process of metabolism, of converting of converting. Excuse me. It's getting to be kind of long. My voice is going hoarse.
That's
Of
fine. We'll wrap it up.
of converting, of taking chemical energy and harvesting that energy to make it available to do work. That's what life is. It isn't a substance.
Okay.
It's the same with
So,
consciousness. Consciousness is not a substance. It's not a thing. It's
okay.
simply
Well, I can grant.
it's
Let's
simply
say
the activity of neurons,
if even if I
right?
granted
That's what
everything,
consciousness is.
I disagree, and so do other
You
scientists and
disagree.
philosophers.
You
But
disagree. You think that philosophers think that life is a substance?
no, I disagree. I said on the consciousness. They disagree with you on that.
Oh, I don't
But
care. They're wrong.
and they said the same thing about you. But
No, they
let's
don't.
say I
Actually,
granted.
quite a lot of philosophers would agree with me
I'm not. Yeah, I
that
agree that I agree.
consciousness is just it,
I
so
agree.
you
But that's a.
agree?
I agree that a
Then
lot
why
of.
did you bring it up if you agree?
No. Let me finish because you keep cutting me off. I agree that a lot of philosophers agree with you on that. And
Oh, okay.
what I would say is that it doesn't matter how many agree with you, whether it's right or wrong. But what I would point out is that even if I granted you all of that about life, you know, there's non-life and then there's life somehow. And I
No, there
granted
isn't.
you
No, there isn't. There isn't just non-life and life. There's not a clear distinction.
this the exact negation.
There's not a clear distinction.
In the
Viruses,
so
viruses are,
scientists
is
tell
a
us there
virus
was no
alive?
life in
Is
the
a
early
virus,
Earth's atmosphere.
is a virus alive?
Yes.
No, it's not. It's not alive.
Are
It
you
doesn't have,
by alive I
it's
just
a,
mean something like organic.
so you think, so you think that carbon is alive?
I wouldn't say carbon was organic.
Carbon is organic. Yes, it is.
Yeah, but you're conflating the term. I don't mean organic in the sense like um like something is organic in the sense like
Ammonia is organic. Do you think ammonia is alive?
well, let me look up the definition of organic so that we're not talking in circles
Or
here.
organic simply means it's carbon based.
Well,
That's the broad 411 on.
no, it says organic is
This is more,
relating to or
yes,
or derived from living matter. Exactly what I thought it
right,
was.
right.
Yeah. So
No,
organic does have to do with living. You said it didn't have anything to do with life.
no, that's not what organic means.
I just read the definition.
Well, you read the wrong one.
I just think that I mean, I know you don't believe that, but that's just what the dictionary
Organic simply means is just carbon compounds.
synonyms: living, life, animate, biological, biotic.
So this is just like basic chemistry. Organic means carbon compounds.
Yeah,
So
I think we're just going to disagree on that.
well, you
You're
can bring this
conflating
up.
the term. Do you
No,
understand what
I'm
an
not.
equivocation is?
I'm not equivocating. I'm sticking to my original.
Yeah,
I've
but I
maintained
brought
the
up the
same.
term organic and I used it in one way, and you're using it in a different way to try and
No.
show me I'm wrong.
So the point is that life doesn't have a precise definition, right? The definition I gave is reasonably good enough, but there are things that are sort of in between, like viruses. It could be, depending on how you want to classify them, you could say that they're not alive,
Okay.
or you could say that they are alive because they are capable of reproduction.
Okay. Well,
Right? But
let me
so
just
the
do this. Let me do this to see if I'm right or not. I looked up the definition of life because you said life could mean what you meant, and it says organic. It says the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from organic matter, uh, including the capacity for growth, reproduction,
yeah, yeah,
functionality, activity, continual change preceding death.
sure.
It says life is the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter. Like, so that's what I'm saying is, if you use that in any other way, life or organic, either of those terms, you're using them in an equivocating way that
No, I'm
doesn't
not.
represent my position.
Because there's a difference between like inorganic chemistry and organic chemistry,
I agree.
right? And that's what we're talking about.
No, I'm not. I'm just talking about philosophical life and non-life. The organic living and the non-organic, like a rock. Compare a rock and a bunny rabbit. That's
Well,
organic and not organic, living and not living. And I'm saying the early Earth's atmosphere was inorganic, like treacherous place.
no, it wasn't inorganic.
Okay, I'm just
There
using
were many
science.
compounds. There was a lot of amino acids. There were a lot of organic compounds.
Not when it was a boiling hot.
Well, no, of course not.
That's what I'm saying. That's the early Earth's atmosphere. And then it cooled down. At this point, still no life. That's what I'm saying. At some point, it had to go no life and then life. This
Right.
isn't something I made up. This is a known thing. Like people
Yeah,
know
but
about this distinction.
life isn't a thing. It's not a substance. It's not a substance. It's not a substance.
I know. It's the property of being organic.
Yes. No, it's not the property of being organic.
It's the
property of
condition
being
that
able
distinguishes.
to reproduce, to grow, to have a metabolism.
Yes, and there was none of that because it was a treacherous planet.
Right.
And then at some point, something became like that. And
Right.
what I'm saying is, it is less probable to believe that life comes from the non-living into living somehow naturally than it is that a life, a mind or something like that, like God, created living because whatever created it was also alive.
That's irrational.
Okay.
Yeah, it is, because to suppose that a wizard did it is not an explanation.
Like, here's the thing: is you prove my points though when you say that, because if you watch my debate review with Aaron Ra, I make a point throughout that whole thing to say, is a running joke with Christians that atheists always bring up storybooks, fables,
Yeah,
magic, wizards, witches, warlocks, you name it.
Yeah.
And it never fails.
Magic. It's magic.
Yeah,
it's an
magic.
appeal to magic. Which you just did. Which you just did. You said it's more reasonable to believe in magic than to believe in natural processes brought about the conditions sufficient for the amino acids, and then RNA world, and DNA, and eukaryotes and prokaryotes, and eventually algae. And
where did all those come from? Where did all those come from? You see, I'm saying that life came from.
Where did they come from? I just told you where they came from.
I'm saying that life came from life, and you're saying that there was non-life.
Life isn't a thing. Life isn't a thing.
We're just going to disagree there, obviously.
Well, it's not a matter of disagreeing.
Okay, well, I can put it in a different. I can say living. There was non-living, then there was living. It doesn't change.
There was a smooth progress.
Between living and non-living?
Yes.
What's the intermediate stage between non-living and living?
The primordial soup, which was
non-living.
Right, but it was full of organic chemicals.
Well, no, because that one qualifies.
Amino acids. There were amino acids.
Yeah, that's
all
living.
The precursors. No, amino acids aren't alive.
You don't think so?
No, they're not alive.
I don't know. I don't know enough about chemistry to prove you wrong.
Just the organic precursors to life are not alive.
Well, I just think that we're so far off on that topic that we probably aren't going to agree on it. But I would say this, that from what I heard from other people, that you're irrational and you'll never have a good conversation, that you'll just try and bloviate and talk over. I don't think that's what happened here. I think that you tried to give a case for some of your arguments and that you did have a rational conversation. I think we got caught in the weeds on some things, but I do think in the end that you did kind of you were trying to be rational. So I don't I will say that you didn't do what some people said that you would do in
Well,
that.
I don't know, who you're talking to or who you're referring to. I suspect that what happens quite a lot. I debate a lot of flat earthers, actually, and I
Oh, they
find
weren't flat earthers, I'll tell you
well,
that.
I know, but I have experience. That's what I can relate to. Is I will tell flat earthers simple, basic physics like gravity, which they deny. They deny the existence of gravity, and they call me every name in the book, and that I'm insane, and I'm crazy, and I'm not making any
Yes.
sense, and I'm just reciting to them basic elementary physics and basic astronomy, and they
Yeah,
can't comprehend it.
but
And so
wouldn't
I
you?
suspect that this
But
person,
could
whoever told you this, was in a similar boat. There's plenty of people out there
Yeah, but
who,
let me ask you this: could you not agree that you were wrong about some things tonight?
no, I don't think I was wrong about anything.
Okay, that's all I'm asking. Some people, at the end of the talk will say, "Hey, there was a lot I didn't know, and I think you're right about some things." And you know,
You
I
didn't
mean,
spring anything on me that I wasn't already aware of.
yeah, but it seemed like you weren't aware of a lot of
What
stuff.
was
Like,
what was I not aware of?
um, you weren't. Well, there's a lot of things. Take for example, the odd implies can distinction, or take for
Yeah.
example the
I don't
living and
think that's a
non-living.
I don't think that's a real thing.
It is a real thing.
I don't, yeah, but I don't think it's a big deal. The
Okay.
real major distinctions that are made in philosophy are between fact and value, is and ought, objective, subjective distinction. Those things are big and
Yeah,
important.
but you also didn't, like, you said that you had problems with like your issues with the manuscripts, and then the church fathers living 200 to 300 years later, like it just wasn't
Yeah,
even close.
Polycarp's work is dated around 130 to 140.
After Christ died,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Not after all the apostles died.
Well, they would have passed away within about 30 or 40 years.
Not all of them.
Sure they.
Polycarp was contemporaneous with John the Apostle. He was his teacher. So I'm just saying.
Well, that's the legend anyway.
Well, no, that's what his own writing saying. What all the other people who trained under him. John established churches for 20 years. Like everybody knew him. He established churches all over the place, like all around all around there. So, but anyway, like I say, I don't think we're going to end up saying, "Oh, okay, well, I agree with you." But I did want to just point out before I end this that you know, um, I did appreciate that you didn't like get into ad hominem attacks, or
Well,
that you
I
did.
don't, I don't, but I will give as good as I get.